morning, everyone. I'm so happy to finally get a chance to talk to Dr. Louise Ohashi. Good morning.
Good morning. It's really great to see you here this morning.
Oh, it's great to see you here. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. You're kind of one of my sort of faraway idols, even before the pandemic. Oh no, seriously. I remember. I think you did a presentation, maybe around 2016, 2017 in Fukuoka or JALT, Fukuoka JALT or Kitakyushu JALT. And I remember one of my friends went and he said, "Oh, guess what? Dr. Louise Ohashi came to Fukuoka." And I said, "Wow, cool." I couldn't go, but he was singing your praises and we were talking about the things you did. And I thought, wow, that'd be really cool if I could actually, go to presentations like that. But at the time, I didn't have any money for it. I didn't have time and money to join JALT. And now here I am.
And here we are.
Yeah, and this is going to be fun. I will now let a whole bunch of people in.
Okay.
And they can, oh, there they go. Okay, I guess I just missed the button. Okay, and here comes everyone. There's our couple of not a couple, one Australian friend and a few American friends and a whole bunch of people that we know. For some of you who are just starting to come into the room, as per usual OTJ protocol, I want to give the maximum opportunity for Dr. Ohashi to share with us her thoughts and her ideas on things that are related to her great specialty, which is call education and other things that she's concerned about. So I will not be letting people to speak directly into the room. Till a little later, when we have a chance to get all those ideas out. Louise, you just came back from Australia. How's Australia? Nice and cold?
Yeah, but it was warmer than I imagined it was going to be. I hadn't been to Melbourne in over a decade in winter. So I was planning to have the electric blanket on every night, and there were some nights I could skip it. So, I mean, for me, that was a warm winter.
Okay. We are going to talk tonight about tech in language education, your reflections, your predictions. As I mentioned, you've sort of been a long-time call leader. You're a fairly well-known name in call education in JALT around the world. You do your keynotes, you do your plenaries. When the pandemic came to the fore, and you found yourself having to face the challenges like all of us did, what was it like for you? You're fairly well known for having really good tech skills, but how was it for you? Did you find yourself just as confused as I was?
At the beginning, the issue was that I wouldn't be using call in the way I'd been using it before, which was face-to-face with students where I could talk them through things and show them things directly. It was me in my bedroom, essentially, and students in their bedrooms and living rooms, and not being there to support them if they didn't know what to do. And just getting them to Zoom or getting them to the platforms that we were using at the beginning was a huge hurdle. So yeah, it was completely different. Myself, I felt okay with the tech jump that I was about to make. But bringing the students to that same place was, a different matter completely, and not something that I had control of, obviously. None of us had control of that at the beginning because we were so thrown into it by the circumstances. So, and simultaneously, I had a lot of colleagues who were freaking out because they hadn't, used tech before, and suddenly it was pushed upon them. So I tried to do my bit with helping out with, workshops or chatting with people through Messenger or on Facebook and that type of thing, sometimes phone calls, to share ideas, to offer support and that type of thing.
What did you find that, you and I hang out in university circles, or what did you find that instructors at the university level seem to be missing out on most in terms of knowledge that would have helped during the pandemic? Was it knowledge of learning management systems? Was it knowledge of just basic, keyboard shortcuts for their software? What did you find that they needed the help most with?
Well, a lot of the people I know dealt with learning management systems that were in-house to their universities and not really up for the task. And I had a lot of frustration with some systems that I had to use too. So it wasn't always that teachers were lacking skills or that teachers didn't know how to use things. It was a combination of us perhaps not knowing how to use the tools that were there, and the tools not always being up to the task that we wanted them for. So there was a little bit of that, but also that a lot of people around me hadn't been integrating CALL so much into their lessons. And it went from 0, 10%, 20% for some people to 100 suddenly when they were forced to work from home. And obviously that brought with it a lot of stress, a huge learning curve. And that's why OTJ was so essential in that time. And the community that was built through OTJ just flourished because there was such a need for it.
That stress level, that that frustration that people were maybe vocalizing when you were maybe trying to help them with this or trying to help them with that. I'm sure that all of us did our best and managed to make it through. But did you see it going up, or did you see it actually going down in terms of over 2022, 2021, and now we're what, into the last quarter of 2022? Did you find that teachers started to get used to things, or did you find that there's, or do you find that they're still kind of angry with life, shall we say?
Well, there's fatigue, right, from dealing with this pandemic for over 2 years now, and just the continued uncertainty of what we'll be doing next semester or what's coming in the future, whether we're going to have to do hybrid classes, whether we're going to have to find ways to give exams online, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just uncertainty, and there has been an increased workload for many people. In that they not only have to do their lessons now once, they have to think of alternatives that they can offer to students who aren't there. I mean, even myself, with students who couldn't make it to exams, even though we're partly face-to-face, there's always got to be a plan B now. And I mean, we needed plan Bs in the past. Maybe we need now a plan B and a plan C, and that can be very fatiguing.
Before we continue, I wanted to mention to everyone that even though I have sort of controlled your ability to jump straight into the conversation, just so that we can make sure that Dr. Ohashi has a maximum opportunity to share her ideas, I will be watching the chat, as I always do. And if Louise doesn't see those chat messages, I'll be bringing them to her. So please share with us your questions there, or in Facebook, in the Facebook live stream. I'll be watching the comments. And we have one already from our good friend, Adam Jenkins. And yes, he has been looking forward to this one for a long time, apparently. Now, we're in this, we're still a little bit frustrated. We're still dealing with tools that we may not be totally familiar with. What's in store in terms of, well, what do you see in terms of the end game here as we come out of things? Teachers are going to abandon these things, these new tools, as they go back to what they want to, which is, oh, I can't wait to get back to my chalk and talk lectures.
Some will, but a lot of people I've spoken to and a lot of comments I've read, even in OTJ, are that teachers have picked up new skills and learned how to do things in different ways. And what that gives us as educators is choice. And so now, for example, if we set a task, we can choose if we want to do it in the classroom as a group work task, for example, or if we want to set that online and have students do part of it together outside of the class and collaborate, and then bring in the results, for example, to the classroom. Or if we want to do a quiz that had previously been done on paper, or now have it done and have it auto-corrected. I remember reading a comment from somebody saying that, this person had not known that they could get quizzes auto-corrected. And I was like, wow, this is a good thing for you now to know.
I have something to tell you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There are so many things that can help us with managing assessment, managing learning tasks, managing workflow that we can use, disseminating information to students. I think, gosh, back when I was working part-time at Waseda, when was this like 2011? Yeah, it was the year of the big earthquake. I was only there once a week with a couple of classes. And I thought I needed a way for students to be able to contact me as a part-time teacher. So what I did was I set up a blog, and it had 2 tabs, one for each class. And I used that as my way of sharing the materials for any students who are absent. I mean, it's quite a big class. There were 40 to 45 students per class. You're always guaranteed to have a couple of students who miss it. And because I wasn't there permanently, and I didn't have a work email that I was using with the students, so much that I was checking every day, I mean, like I do in a full-time job. I thought it might be easier for me and easier for them if I just put the materials online and wrote a short summary of what we'd done in the class. And so that's when I began kind of creating, I suppose that was I don't know, a very loose version of a learning management system. You couldn't really call it that because they couldn't submit there, but there was a comments function that they could reply to. It wasn't really a two-way flow in the way that the learning management systems we're using now are, things like Moodle that I use with all of my classes. But it was kind of my foray into this kind of thing. And it made my life easier. And it made it easier for students who didn't have to sit there and write a message in English to me, asking me about homework they'd missed and asking me to send it. And I didn't have to go and check that work email that I, all of the time. I could just put the information out there. So yeah, I think I started trying to use tech in ways that could improve outcomes for me and my students ages ago. So my even blog projects, I'm thinking back to 2000 and maybe 9 or 10, I started doing blogging projects with students, might have been 2008 even, back when I was working at Shukutoku University. And then students, instead of writing, we'd been given some diaries for students to use in a writing class. And then I thought, well, that's not very interactive. Maybe we could put their writing tasks on a blog, and then I could rotate in groups so that they could comment on each other's posts, and it could be a more interactive thing. And so I started really exploring tech probably from around about then.
That's a pretty long journey. That's over a decade. And you went through that pre-pandemic, watched the slow growth of call and LMSs, and then you jumped into the pandemic with the rest of us. Would you say that, well, of course, that time before the pandemic is unique to you, but this time that was in the pandemic, that overall forcing teachers to learn tech tools and LMSs and whatnot, and maybe even the whole idea of online professional development and online conferencing, that this has brought us to a better situation than we were before 2019?
Yeah, but it was a painful journey. I do think that it's equipped us with new skills, and that those skills, a lot of them were essential for us to have. But they came at a cost, because there are a lot of pressures that teachers and students faced in this pandemic, things like social isolation, things like tech overload, things like the lack of support that they would have had in a face-to-face situation when you're sitting at home in your bedroom trying to figure out how to get through the week. I think that's a huge cost. So the pandemic obviously wasn't the best way for this to happen, but we need to take with us the positives that came out of it. And that's that we have a much more knowledgeable, flexible workforce and students coming in to education now than we had before the pandemic, where we have a bigger tool set that we need to use wisely. I mean, obviously, always the pedagogical goals need to come first, not tech as a
be all and end all.
Entertainment.
Yeah. So that's a situation for the educators and maybe the administrators and the faculty. But do you think that the students saw it from a different perspective? I mean, I'm sure that they would probably have different stories to tell about as you were mentioning earlier on at the onset of the conversation, that they too are having their difficulties with learning management systems and whatnot. So it was, as you said, it was a painful but worthwhile journey for teachers. But how do you think students, do you think they're better off now, students, than they were back in 2020, 2019? With what they have to do, what they have to learn, because of the fact that, at any given moment, they could be diagnosed positive and then they have to like learn how to use a QWERTY keyboard?
They're more prepared for the kind of global stage, if I can say it, than they were before. But as I said, it came at a huge cost. And I would not have liked to have gone through university in this way. I mean, when I think back to my own university experience, quite happy with the way it was. And I mean, that was just when the internet was coming in. I got my first email account at university and didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. And looking back, I'm quite happy about that, because when I finished university at the end of the day, that was it. It was done. I mean, I wasn't tied to it constantly. And these days, there are, LMSs are sending out messages to students at any time of day, and they've got deadlines, set within computers that connect to their courses that we didn't have.
Right.
I'll admit, I was really bad when I was a university student with deadlines, and we used to have a deadline of a Friday usually for assignments. But if you got an envelope and it was postmarked for Friday and then you sent it on Sunday, it would still be like you sent it on Friday. Don't ask me how I know that.
I won't. I'll just relate my story. I had to ask so often for extensions from my professors for the essays I was supposed to submit that I got really good at it. I got really good. I'd be able to tell a sob story without ever lying, without ever being dishonest, but I managed to always just squeeze out that extra week or so.
Well,
I got a couple of questions, and in the chat and in the Facebook thread, and we'll get to them. One from Doug Strabel and one from Jim in the chat. But I just want to follow up on just one more thing. So teachers were pushed through a meat grinder, but they came out better for it. Same with the students. How then do we sort of deal with these demands, maybe from politicians and perhaps parents, or from other students or other members of society who said that, oh, we're dealing with quotation marks learning loss, and learning loss is a setback. Or maybe they're talking about elementary school students or junior high school students, 10 years. And I don't know how you get that figure, that's going to be 10 years, but at least 2 years. Do we just say, well, suck it up because that's the price that we pay for actually being in a better place? Or how do we deal? I don't know if you have any thoughts on how we deal with like what we did lose, what we did sacrifice to get where we are now.
yeah, that's a really hard question, because we can change what happens from today, but obviously we can't change what's already passed us by. In terms of learning loss, I mean, I can definitely say that it happened in some primary schools, or where they were closed, remember, at the beginning of the pandemic for months on end, without, in many cases, much being sent out to families. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was at Meiji, I think we didn't start till after Golden Week. And so that was to give teachers and students and admin time to get their heads around the new way they were going to teach the content, the new platforms and software they were going to use. And yeah, sure, we can say that's a loss. It was gone. There were makeup assignments, but how much can you make up when everybody was so overloaded anyway? That it's just impossible. People were doing doggy paddle just to stay afloat. So how can we make up for it? I don't think we can. I mean, I think that's past. And whatever learning losses were faced, we have to just sustain them and say, okay, that happened. Let's move on, because we can't go back and change it. But I think what we can do is learn from it. And with this pandemic, things have changed to the point that, I don't know, in the past, if there was a typhoon and classes were cancelled at schools, just classes were cancelled. Now, those days don't necessarily need to be cancelled. Teachers and students are well capable of having an on-demand task set that can be dealt with, and that can be shared very readily. People know where to post it now. Students know where to look for it now. If there's time to organize it, a live Zoom class could be done in days where we have these kinds of issues. So I think that there was learning loss in the past as well,
Yes.
but it was just smaller scale.
Yeah.
And maybe now we have some of the tools to deal with those future, points where we would have had learning loss, because we have a different skill set, a different toolbox available to us now. Yeah.
I think also too, because of the froth of the pandemic and all of the things that are being thrown around and ideas that were being given actual attention that weren't being given attention before, things like accessibility and equity in the classroom being brought forward by people like Dr. Jana Moore, who was on the show, and Alex Burke, who's been on the show, has taken a new position on the stage, and people are paying attention to them when they weren't before. And I think, yeah, you can talk about the learning loss for, the normative students that we mostly deal with, but think about all the advantages that came for people that weren't getting, or were maybe getting, a short shrift because they weren't getting the attention that they should have. I think I don't want to say it all balances out, but there are diamonds in the dust, right? And we got to sort of look for them. So now I want to get to those comments that were thrown around. One was by Jim Ronald in the chat, and I'll read this out. Maybe students are better off now compared to 2.5 years ago because their teachers are better equipped to be their guides and less often messing up with the tech. Doug Strabel asks Louise, and I'll throw this out to you, could Louise give a general outline of how her online classes are structured from the learner perspective, a day in the life of the student, so to speak?
Ooh, wow. Okay. I mean, I've this semester gone back face to face, but still have a lot of things online because I had always done that beforehand. I will tell you about maybe some different types of classes. So in my lecture class, we started out in April online only because the number of students meant that it should have been an online class. But the Wi-Fi on campus just made it impossible to continue that. In the first class, I got feedback from students about how much they could hear or their connection issues and so forth. And I spoke with the office about going face-to-face after contacting the students to survey them to see if they were available to do that or not, if they preferred it, if they needed to be online, etc. So having gone in with the idea that this would be an online only course, from week 2, I transitioned it to a face-to-face course after getting feedback from students that they either 100% wanted to be face-to-face or they were open to either option. So nobody was forced to go back onto the campus. And in that lecture course, I prepare a series of slides, and it's a course on second language acquisition, and they get information in small chunks. So we have let's say a small lecture with several slides, and then it will generally have a video. I will find a video on YouTube that gives a simple overview of the kind of thing that I'm trying to explain. They will watch that, take notes, and then there will be some discussion prompts, and they will talk with some people around them. Or in some cases, they won't, because some students really don't want to be near other people still during the pandemic. Right. So I give them a choice, and if they prefer to sit at a big distance from students to the point that they can't really have discussions, then I respect that, and they can make notes about the video themselves and the response to the discussion prompts. And this continues in a cycle because I break down the information into small chunks. We have several rounds of this within that class. Then for their homework, they have a Moodle task, and the Moodle task will give them a choice of answering certain questions that related to the lecture content. And then I respond to the Moodle task, and they can read other students' tasks, and they can respond as well. So there's that out-of-class interactive element and the in-class interactive element. And that's for a lecture course. And typically lecture courses aren't all that interactive, right?
Right.
Maybe the image of a lecture course is the sage on a stage sharing their information, but I don't find that particularly useful. So I like these interactive elements. And it's really helpful for me when I go to the Moodle to be able to read each student's comments and responses to it. Time consuming, yes, but very interesting. Whereas in my self-directed learning course, it's kind of different. It's a smaller class. You know, let's say there are 30 students, which is bigger than I'm used to for those kinds of classes, but that's the way we've set it up for this year. And students will again use Moodle. They were also using Flipgrid, and they had their face-to-face classes. So we sometimes use Flipgrid in class to do group projects. They sometimes use Flipgrid out of class to share projects. And for those who aren't familiar with Flipgrid, it's basically a video sharing site. So you can set up prompts for students, and they can create a video to respond to it. Actually, a colleague and I are going to do a workshop at GELT 2022 on Flipgrid, which is, now called Flip. They've dropped the grid. I don't know what that's
why.
about.
Why do you need it? But okay.
So we use that. So students typically, if they're in my course, they will see the Moodle before the course, and they will see not a lot on the Moodle at the beginning, because I add things bit by bit so that students don't get overwhelmed by a massive information right at the beginning.
Yes.
And they will set up a Flipgrid account with me in the first class. They will learn how to use the Moodle forums with me in the first or the second class. And then Flipgrid and Moodle will be the tools that they can use to communicate online with each other and with me throughout the course. There'll be quite a lot of videos that they watch during my courses. They will have generally weekly assignments that they do that could be submitted through Flipgrid or could be submitted through Moodle. And they will have a lot of group work and discussion inside the course in the face-to-face element. Yeah, I suppose those are some of the basics that happen. Not sure if that answered the question, but snippets.
You talked about Flip, you talked about Moodle.
Yeah.
Tell us what Dr. Louise Ohashi's tools of choice are other than those.
Other than those, gosh, I mean, during that, I'm really interested in learner autonomy, and that's one of my main research areas. My PhD was on learner autonomy and the use of digital tools for language learning. And so I introduced my students to a lot of them. So, for example, in that self-directed learning course I was talking to you about, we have different modules early in the course where we will focus on tools to improve listening, reading, writing, speaking, vocabulary. And for example, in the listening module, we will look at tools like there's a website called the Fable Cottage, and that can be used for listening or for reading. It's basically fairy tales that are available for free for students to listen to, watch a video that tells a story, read the story. And it's something I originally found when I was studying Italian, because that site, you can see the different languages available there. I love studying languages myself. I've actually read stories. I've read Chicken Little and the Whale and the Bird and the Whale in all of those 5 languages. And I'm working my way through some new ones in Spanish now. And so I often try out the tools that I get my students to use. I mean, another one is Ello for the listening. I get students to do that. Of course, you guys know Todd. And I remember I first met Todd in a workshop that I was doing on tools that can be used for extensive and intensive listening. And Todd turned up to the workshop, and when I was introducing his site, he's like, I can't believe it. I'm so happy you're introducing my site. I'm like, hey, I can't believe you made this site. I'm so happy you came to this session. And that's how he and I met. And yeah, I think that the resources on that site are just fabulous. There are 1 minute, like really short sessions that students can watch and check out the transcripts. And I was getting my students to use that for TOEFL practice, because in TOEFL, there's a section where you have a question and you need to give a short answer. So I was in my TOEFL class back when I was at Meiji. My students would use Elo to look up some different questions and then listen to the answers, and then to come up with their own and record them themselves, and then listen to what they recorded, and then see if they could find some areas that they needed to improve. Like maybe they noticed that they repeated the same basic vocabulary, or they realized that they hadn't put it into past tense in some parts when they should have. And then to do it again, record themselves a second time, and then choose another Elo prompt and try again. So, you know, there are a lot of different ways that we can use the materials that are out there, not just the ways that the courses or the sites were designed to be used. We have to think of really different ways we can use them. Even TED Talks, we think of TED Talks maybe as something we use for listening, but it's not just for listening. You could use it just for reading because they have the transcripts there. You could use it for checking pronunciation because you can read the transcript and then go put it in the interactive transcript mode, click on it if you want to hear how it's said, or you can have the subtitles in English and the transcript in Japanese and do a comparison. So there's lots of things that we can do. And so in my self-directed learning course, I introduce a whole range of materials. And then I set students a challenge of thinking how they could use them. They have to come up with different ways that they could use them, and not just follow the prompts that are on a site, or not just think about the most obvious way you could use them. Think about ways that might be useful for you. And when they brainstorm together and do that, they come up with some really great ideas.
When you give them those sort of assignments and maybe they end up on a flipped video or maybe a recorded voice track on MP3, and then you receive them, how do you assess them? Like, what kind of rubric do you use? I mean, you don't have to go into super detail or anything, but and then how do you plug that into your assessment, or do you plug that into your term assessment, you know, marks out of 100 to get percentages to get you between C or C plus or whatever? Do you do that with those assignments, or do you just sort of like bring them to the side and say, well, this is something important for you to learn how to do, but here's the final test and it's worth 40% of your grade, so don't forget to concentrate on that? How do you approach it?
I hate assessing. Honestly, I've never liked it. I'm more interested in students' journeys, and I really, it's the part of my job that I don't like at all. I don't want to give a score. And I mean, especially in a self-directed learning course.
Right. I was wondering, how do you do that in the self-directed learning? Or, well, how do you get the students themselves to frame the requirements that you have to fill out for the administration, as opposed to the philosophy that you're trying to pass on?
Right. So for a lot of the assignments that I have in the self-directed learning course, it's, you know, for each, for example, each Moodle response, it was done or it was not done, or it was done late. And those are the 3 categories. And so if it was done, it gets a point. If it was not done, it gets no point. If it was done late, it gets half a point. And that makes it very easy to assess it. And I told the students from the beginning, you know, that we have a dialogue on Moodle, and everything is scored as done, complete or incomplete, which is the same as my high school education. We used to have satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and those were the categories. And then you were graded in exams and so forth. But a lot of our major assessment tasks were done like that. And so when it gets to the, you know, the parts that I really do need to grade, like the, I don't know, the presentations and so forth, I have individual rubrics that have things that focus on, for example, the content, the the delivery, etc. So a standard presentation rubric, and that would probably be similar to many of the things that you do, that everybody here does. So I have rubrics that really do focus on different parts of the assignments for things like exams, for things like presentations, for things like reports. But for Moodle tasks, it's generally a done or not done. And with the lecture course, I just made it word count based. There's a score out of 10 for each one, and it's based on the word count and how much they write. And that gives students choice on how much time they want to spend engaging with the task. And it's incredible. So many of the students write far, far more than they need to get even the maximum points available. I mean, sometimes double. So yeah, sometimes there's one particular guy I'm thinking about now. Yeah, I remember his first response was more than 4 times what he needed to write. So yeah,
I had the same experience with a bunch of students that were all overachievers, and I expected like 75 words to a simple question, like
right.
oh yeah, it was say hello to Mr. Cruz and introduce your ideas about what you want to do in this class. It was like a first week sort of after class reflection, and a couple of students wrote like 400-word essays.
Oh yeah, no,
And I'm going, what the whoa, this is nice.
well, that first assignment that I got was like 1,000 words. I mean, and I was 250 words was S in that assignment.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of students 400, 500, and then his assignment. Wow, he had a lot to tell me about this topic, and it was very, very interesting. So I think I like to encourage students to express themselves in the ways that they want to. So I sometimes give choice on how you can respond to tasks. Like I thinking again about the self-directed learning course, that there are some things where they can respond as an audio like response. They could record themselves, or they could respond in text, or they have 2 choices about which part to answer. Instead of just prescribing 100% all of the time what students should do, giving them choices in the mode of response and giving them choices in the response itself, like question task options. Yeah. Yeah. In the lecture course, I usually choose maybe between 2 and 4 question prompts about the lecture content. And then I tell them that they can answer, I might write, for example, choose at least 2. And some of them will choose all 4 of them and write a little bit about all of them. Some of them will choose just 2. Some of them will choose 3. And they even in the exam that I did for that course, there was something like 10 different prompts in part A that they needed to write short answers for, and they just needed to choose 5 of them. And for the long answer essay prompt, there were 5 choices and they chose 1. So yeah, I don't want to know what they don't know. I want to know what they do know, what they learned, the bits they learned. It's not a memorization test, but I just want them to be able to express what they picked up through the course and what they feel confident sharing their knowledge on.
Speaking of sharing knowledge, I would like to invite everyone who is in the room or watching us on Facebook to start thinking of some questions they would like to ask Dr. Ohashi. We'll be opening up the room in terms of conversation. But I want to go through a couple of these other sort of bigger questions that we put onto the PR card for the event. And the next one that I'm always interested in is what's next. So here we are, kind of like still a little bit woozy from the pandemic. But what do you see as becoming the next big wave or the next sort of big challenge or the next big topic for us, either in university or for education, not just in Japan, but overall around the world, either digitally or pedagogically, that we're going to have to face?
Well, I think now that some people have realized that working off campus and studying off campus suits them, that there'll be a transition to some courses being done online only. In Australia, that's quite common. There are some online modes, whereas in Japan, it's really not. And for universities to be able to make that transition where they offer specific things to students who might not come to the campus at all, like distance education, in a country like Australia, that's massive. If like many hours away from the campus, from the closest campus, we had to adapt to that years and years and years ago. And I think that, there are a lot of people, for example, if you think about graduate courses, there are a lot of people who work and are interested in doing a grad course, but they don't necessarily want to go into the campus or aren't necessarily available at that particular time. I think that the pandemic has maybe given a bit of a push to Japan in that direction of being able to diversify the way that courses are offered to learners, giving that kind of choice. But it involved, and it will involve changes to the infrastructure, because it's not available. I mean, this is a long-term plan that universities need to get with. But I think there'll be competition in the years ahead among universities to attract more students, and that this will be a leverage point.
I'm not absolutely familiar with the challenges that are faced in the outback or in the remote communities in Australia. I did speak during one roundtable conversation that I was privileged to host for the International Publishers Exhibit back in 2021, and there were representatives of TESOL Victoria and TESOL Queensland there, and they were talking about how the pandemic, because they were caught unawares, made it difficult for them to actually reach out to the more impoverished communities that they normally served. And I don't know about that community very well, but I know that in Canada, when I was asked to talk about my own ideas, as impoverished as they were, about the future of remote teaching, I was thinking about the potential for reaching out to communities in Canada that were remote, in the north, in the native Canadian communities that are underserved. But at the same time, I'm glad you mentioned the idea of infrastructure, because I don't know just how appropriate it is to talk about remote teaching and digital learning tools to communities that don't get clean drinking water, and the priority that priority mismatch that might be. But what do you see in terms of priority for actually addressing those infrastructure questions, which are big? If they're not there, then we can't get to these people with these new remote learning tools that show us so much potential. What do you see where faculty, administration, community, politicians, industry can put together? Do you see anything happening? Do you hear talk about anything like that going on?
Gosh, I haven't heard anything, no. But I think that, those key players that you mentioned just now, those different groups, I think the challenge is bringing them together onto the same page, because there's often a dissonance between the different stakeholders. And so the objectives, I mean, sometimes it's just political. It's just to say, oh, we're doing our best. And sometimes there's a genuine care. And sometimes there's just some kind of random hope, or, that's not really backed up by any funding, that's not really backed up by any concrete plan. And so a lot of the time, these well-intentioned plans, hopes, dreams don't actually bear fruit, which is sad. But so I don't know, I suppose I can't really predict where that's going to go.
I was kind of hoping you would have something to say, because I have no idea myself. I do know that it is something that that we need to address, because all of these hopes and dreams that we have, sitting here from a privileged position in a very privileged country, if it doesn't bear fruit with the people that we really need to help, which are the people that most need our attention as learners, I wonder where it does go from here. Different topic. One of your big things these days is machine translation. And you've talked about that a bit.
Yeah.
is that something we should be afraid of, or is that something that we can embrace? Where does it lie in terms of classroom tools? There were teachers that say, absolutely not. You use that in my classroom, you're guilty of plagiarism, basically. Is that too extreme an idea?
Well, I think it's a real world tool that students have access to, whether educators sanction that or not. And it's a real world tool that they're going to use when they graduate. So obviously there are times when it's appropriate and inappropriate to use it. There are tasks that it's okay for, tasks that it's not okay for. And I think that what we need to do as a field is figure out what those lines are and communicate them well to students and have students understand them for themselves. I've actually done assignments with students, not for research purposes, just out of interest and exploring with students about their use of machine translation and their thoughts on it and so forth. And actually, a lot of the feedback that I got from students was that they are resisting it because they don't want their English skills to go down, or they're using it but sparingly, or they're turning to it when they're feeling really lazy and have something that's due right away, or they're skeptical of the output, or they're laughing at the output sometimes, and they haven't had training on it. They're just using it by feel, feeling their way through it. So I think it kind of suggests to me that there's potential for it to be used in really positive ways, but there's not a lot of training among teachers. There's not a lot of training for students within the formal education setting. And the different tools that are available have different affordances, and they haven't really been explored. And when people think of machine translation, people think of academic writing classes and the students putting in their English essay and putting in their Japanese essay, popping out the English essay and submitting it, or using it to improve their writing. I'm really interested in the possibilities that we have, not just through writing or for writing, but for other skills as well. I mean, my interest with machine translation stems back to my own use of it as a language learner, because when I've learned quite a lot of Japanese through machine translation.
Yes.
It's really handy to put in kanji and have it read out to you by using the audio function. But Japanese was something I'd been studying before machine translation became a thing. So I can't really, go back and say that it helped me when I was a lower level user. But Italian, I didn't speak Italian at all before 2017. And Google Translate was my best mate at the beginning when I was trying to chat. And I would use it in a really productive way, because if I was chatting with somebody and then I found some expressions that I didn't understand and put it in there and realized, okay, this is a natural expression that I want to use later, I can just use the history function, save it, continue chatting. And then later I can take those expressions and put them somewhere like a notebook or in the notes section of my phone. And over time, through repetition, I picked up these phrases and these expressions. And so that was like a really early kind of attempt at using machine translation in a way that was designed to facilitate my development with a language, not just to cheat and quickly get the meaning. I mean, obviously I was getting the meaning. And then later, when I started wanting to be able to speak better, I remember I was using a language exchange app, and I did this 30-day challenge. And the 30-day challenge had one question each day for 30 days. And so I would look at the challenge and think, okay, this is what I want to say. And I would try to write it in DeepL or Google Translate at the time. I think DeepL didn't have the audio function. I used to still use Google Translate then. So I would write it as best as I could in Italian. Then I'd look at the English and go, yeah, that bit's wrong. And then I'd flip it and I would try and improve it. And it was a process of editing. And then when I had it all there, I would press the button and listen to it so I could see how it sounded. And then I would practice myself saying it a few times. Then I'd listen to it again because I'd realize that I'd get to a word I didn't know how to say. And then I would listen again. And then I would record it to the language exchange app. And so that again is a really kind of, I was applying a method to doing that. And so there are a lot of ways that we can use machine translation, not just as a quick kind of check. I mean, obviously, when I get emails in Japanese, sometimes I just,
yes.
I want that fast fix too. But there are affordances that we can explore. There are things that we can do. If I want to check if my pronunciation on something's right or wrong. I mean, recently I've been studying Spanish and German, and they're new languages for me. But I've got this one here, the little prince next to me in Spanish. So I've been reading it into Google Translate to see if it comes up with what I'm saying. And then the parts that come up with completely different words, I go back and say them again. So I've been practicing my pronunciation with it. There are a lot of different things we can do, but we haven't really begun exploring those yet. And I think that through the study that I did at the beginning of the year, 153 teachers were involved, university teachers who are teaching languages here in Japan. Through the survey and through the interviews I did with them, I started to get an understanding of the the perspectives and the experiences of teachers here. And now I'm hoping to get a Kaken grant for something that will help me to explore the student side. Start investigating that next year. It's what I was working on yesterday, the grant proposal. So we'll see how that goes. But, obviously we need both sides of the equation to get a better understanding, and then perhaps start making some learning materials that can be used by teachers and students based on the feedback of the teachers and students. And creating, like on-demand materials that can be used by students, shared by teachers, that deal with ethical issues related to the use of this tool, that relate to ways that the tools can be used for language development in a very effective manner. So, and that's something I don't know enough about yet. And that's why I'm doing these kinds of research projects.
I think the newness of these tools and the incredibly fast rate that they come out. I mean, it's hard to keep track of all of these new things, like even Flip or Mentimeter or
Right.
the Fable Cottage or whatever. They're coming out at such a fast clip that it's hard to actually put your finger down any one of them and say that, well, let's completely explore the ethical implications of being able to give out PDFs to academic papers without pay or for pay. We're barely over that, and then we have to start thinking about the moral and ethical implications of the next tool. I want to start inviting people to start bringing their questions to the front, and I want to invite our good friend Adam Jenkins to actually talk about his comment in the chat. That Adam, if you want to bring that up yourself. And it was about the "it doesn't hurt me" comment. Want to bring that up with Louise?
Yeah, I've actually talked with Louise about this in the past, but the idea that some of the teachers around me have taken it doesn't hurt me when I use it, but it will hurt you, student, so don't use it, sort of an attitude towards it, which I think is kind of well, if it doesn't hurt you, then why would you think it's going to hurt them, sort of a thing. I'm actually wondering as well how much, because you've actually done the research and asked the questions, and how prevalent is this attitude?
Well, in the interviews, the people who were interviewed, there were 24 interviews. The leaning was really for usage, with some limitations, but the kind of resounding feedback that I got from teachers is, well, I can't really say to people, don't use things I'm using myself. There's this, the survey that I did asked about teachers' own use of machine translation first in their personal lives, and then it asked about their use in their classes, and then it asked about their attitudes towards students using it and their their thoughts on the usefulness of it as a tool for language development. And interestingly, although there are concerns by teachers that it may not be the best, tool for helping with language development, or it may be something that's used for cheating, there was not a preference in the survey overall with 153 teachers for it to be banned. It was very, very rare for respondents to say they think it should be heavily restricted or banned. Many disagreed with it, and many said that they wanted to learn more, that they thought they needed to know more about this area and needed support. And more teachers thought that students were using machine translation in ways that helped than hindered. Yeah, so that's their perceptions. Of course, they don't have proof, but that was the feel that they had on it. So I think as much as and there are times when I've just thought, yeah, I know what you've done there, especially when students don't notice that, DeepL will put 2 translations to give you a choice. Like they'll take a sentence, and the recent version of DeepL will give you that sentence in 2 slightly different ways.
Yeah.
And so when a student's repeated themselves, they've clearly DeepL'd it. And so,
I love the ones where, like, translated by DeepL, they actually take that
Yeah.
actual tag at the bottom, and they don't even
Right.
bother to read their own paper, and they ended up sending that to you.
Right. Yeah. But it depends on the context too. And I've said to my students in the lecture course, if you're using a translator to help you with this assignment, that's okay. I'm really interested in the content. This isn't an academic writing
Right.
course, but you are responsible for what you submit. And if anybody submits to me something where they've just repeated a chunk, it's off the word count. I mean, it's not respectful. You need to understand that I'm spending time reading, 70 plus assignments of 250 words ish at least, and investing time in this. And I'm writing back a comment to you. You need to invest the time for me to do this. And I find that the students are doing it. They're investing the time. There were a couple of those doubled up ones at the beginning. They disappeared after that conversation. I think students are probably doing things more ethically than some teachers worry about. I put trust in my students, that they're there for the right reasons mainly, and I really want to support them. I think my job isn't really to be the judge and adjudicator. It's to be the person that helps them gain a skill or skills that they can carry with them into the next phase of their life. So one of my students who is in 4th year, she came to one of the workshops I did on machine translation, and she's really interested in how she can improve her graduation thesis by using it, but she's not interested in copying her thesis into DeepL in Japanese and having it come out. She's looking at how she can find great collocations for words that are for academic words, and she's looking at how she can formulate her ideas in a more academic way, and she was looking for those kinds of hints. So I think we have to give our students credit as people who are willing to learn, who want to improve themselves, not just think of them as potential cheaters.
Dorothy Zemak mentioned that before. It was last year, I think around this time, when Charlie Brown came on and the whole topic of cheating came up. And she said, what kind of energy are you willing to spend supposedly chasing down that one sort of ghost of a cheater that you think actually exists, as opposed to taking that energy and aiming it towards better teaching in your classroom for the other 39, the other 29 students.
Right. Yeah.
I also think that if you tailor your expectations and your assessment so that then you're not looking at things like, you say, I don't care about your spelling mistakes. I don't care about your typos anymore. I'm looking for the flow. And the flow of the essay itself will appear either if it's taken from a Japanese essay and dropped into DeepL, or if it's written entirely in Japanese, the flow is going to be visible.
Right.
The clauses might be a little bit awkwardly structured, but you can see flow, which is actually harder to learn and harder to teach than grammar.
Right. In the academic writing class that I was teaching at Meiji, the students were not highly graded. There was not a lot of weight on grammar and spelling, because those are really surface level things compared to the well-structured argument that was needed, the citations that were needed, the critical analysis of the topic, and their ability to express it with a well-written topic sentence and put it into that format. Those things were part of the rubric that received more weighting. And so this is a mindset that we need to go through. If we have a tool like DeepL out there, and it's only going to get more and more accurate with the neural networks, then we have to keep that in mind. If you want to know a student's level in terms of their ability to spell, their ability to, form grammatically perfect sentences and so forth, you do an in-class test face-to-face, and that's how you find out. You don't find it out through an essay anymore, because that option it's no longer there. You can tell, you can come up with lots of ways to convince students it's not the right thing to do, but there'll always be some student who's pushed for time, just wants to pass, and they'll do it. And if you want to make that an option for them to do it, by all means, give a lot of weighting to spelling and grammar in your written assignments that you let them do outside of class. But it's not really going to be fair, and it's not really going to be something that helps you understand their level in those areas.
Totally agree. I want to again invite the people in the room to raise your hands using the raise hand button in the reactions panel at the bottom of their Zoom window, and the people in Facebook, if you'd care to join the conversation through the comments thread, that's fine too. Let's see, Louise, you're going to be at the JALT National in Fukuoka this year?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Where else can we see? What other presentations, what other events you're going to be attending and speaking at?
I think I'm kind of done for this year, except for that. I had a few JALT chapter events for Akita and Hiroshima, Matsuyama, Sendai, and I did Eurocall, which was put online, not in Iceland. I did that in August. But at JALT, I'm going to be participating in the teaching with technology workshops, or is it or is it technology? Is that what it's
technology?
TNT. Technology with teaching. I can't remember what the acronym is. TNT sounds like I'm going to blow something up. But that's about machine translation. And then in the main part of the conference, the flip session, the flip workshop. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that'll do me for this year.
You're a typically busy person, I think. Jim, Adam, any other comments that you wanted to ask? Anyone else? You don't get many opportunities like this, everyone. Raise your hand or open up your microphone. Jim.
Yeah, I think the discussion we're having is a discussion that would be a really on-topic thing for a lot of students, especially if they were English majors, that it could be like a more formal debate thing where there's some saying no, some saying yes, or it could be a small group thing when they'd make a list of questions like, what are the benefits, what are the problems, what training, what do we expect from our teachers to become good users of it? What should we avoid doing? So that they can make their kind of guidelines among themselves. And it's kind of like, that's a learning community. And I think it's not beyond kind of middle ranking students who are confronted with it. And we're not saying much as teachers.
Yeah, I really like this idea of negotiation and getting to an agreement through discussion, because whenever you give a set of rules to somebody and they're not involved in it at all, there can be a tendency to question it, to rebel against it, to just think it's pointless, senseless. Whereas if you've done that kind of work that you mentioned, Jim, you've analyzed it yourself, you've brought your own ideas to the table, you've started to think about the positives and negatives, you can come into that with a completely different perspective. So yeah, that for sure I think is important.
And you can get a kind of in-class consensus too.
Right.
Like, yeah, when is it good? What should we agree about that? Or and then imagine it.
Yeah, you know, I do that kind of thing with students for a lot of small aspects of classes. Like, for example, in my grad course, we had a discussion about when the Moodle task should be due each week and when comments should be done by. And the students talk together, because I'm like, I'm flexible. You can have the deadline for Friday for the the task itself, and then comment by Tuesday, or you can have the weekend for it. Talk about it. What's your schedule like? You know it better than me. And then when they've got those deadlines set themselves, they're like, well, I chose these deadlines.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, you chose those deadlines. So it's much easier for me to put the responsibility back on them to stick to them, because they're not something that I imposed on them. And translating that over to this context of machine translation, having them involved in the process and thinking about it and talking about it, for sure, it's got a lot of value. I think when we can do that with any aspect of our teaching, and we can't do with all of them, there are some things that are just, oh, shall we have an exam or not? That's not going to happen. It's in the syllabus, in the exam, it was prescribed. But there are things that we can control and give students control of, to discuss and negotiate. And I think that's really useful.
Thanks, Jim. Catherine, did you want to bring something up?
I just had a little anecdote. Recently at my part-time job at the junior high school, another teacher asked me if I spoke Uzbek, and I do not. And it turns out he's going to Uzbekistan, and he was worried, and he noted that DeepL didn't support that language. And then I just checked, and I said, Google Translate does. And this guy, he knew DeepL, but he didn't know Google Translate. And then
really?
I was like, oh, he's a math teacher. He's going there to teach math as a volunteer for a month. And yeah, then he came up to me and he's like, oh, I downloaded that, and that capture function with the camera, that is so useful.
Right.
Yes, that it would be very useful for you going to Uzbekistan to teach, not knowing the language. Yes, very useful.
Right.
So he was completely mind blown with the camera capture function on Google Translate. So
right, and which is really great, because some things that we think are really well known are worth talking about. Often we assume that everybody knows what we know, and we can be surprised when they don't. And so opening up conversations is always, a step forward, or potential to share something new with somebody.
So it was nice, and he was so delighted. I'm like, he's leaving in a few weeks. I'm like, well, have a great time with.
Right.
Because he was also, because I guess his materials are all PDFs, and so you can't run a PDF through default. So I think he was quite, he was very relieved to have learned about this technology.
Right.
Depending on the PDF, what you could do is just copy paste the PDF text itself into a word processor, or directly copy the PDF text, depending on the PDF, and dropping that into DeepL. DeepL can't read a PDF file directly, but you can copy paste most of the text.
Right.
So actually, I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly what.
But anyway, it doesn't have the language he needs.
It didn't have the language he needs.
So,
but Google, the capture. So he was quite. So it was just I was nice. I was like, wow. I was like, I was really surprised when he asked me if I spoke Uzbek. No, I don't. But
you look like an Uzbeki. Why not?
I do. Yeah. Why
what does an Uzbeki look like anyway?
Yeah.
I was thinking the other day that how some teachers might rebel at the idea of DeepL, and maybe because of its relative newness as a tool, But I was noticing that when it was Jim and me and Adam and you, Louise, in the room, that all four of us are wearing glasses. And 500 years ago, the idea of spectacles was almost heretical to some people, because it went against the idea that you're changing something about yourself as opposed to your God-given image. And that idea, I think, might still be in the minds of people in its own form, that DeepL goes against a natural way of learning. And what it is just like our glasses. They're just tools that we've all just come to accept on our faces. And it isn't anything that we need to think that is against naturalness or anything.
Right. Look, it's like the printing press that was supposed to be the downfall of society.
Yeah, right. Adam says you won't remember that the
radio was supposed to be able to come into
yeah.
people's homes and brainwash them.
Yeah. And Adam points out, that old shibboleth that our algebra teachers would tell us in high school, that, well, you won't always have a calculator with you. And wrong, I do. Or wrong, I do. The calculator comment. Falling into our last opportunities to ask Louise any questions that she might have. But Louise, where do you normally hang out? Like, if people actually wanted to contact you further, or read more of your work, or basically see more of your comments, where do you have a digital hangout? I usually hang out at OTJ, but how about you?
Or directly through Facebook. I'm on Twitter as well. The handle's at Ohashi Lou.
Okay,
so first Ohashi, the same spelling as my last name, and the first three letters of my name. Yep.
There you go. That's Twitter. Follow her on Twitter. Jolt Call. Are you still hanging around Jolt Call these days?
Yeah, although actually I stepped down from volunteering at Jolt Call after quite a number of years. After our last conference, I'm now reviewing for the Jolt Call journal, so I'm helping for that instead. And at Eurocall this year, I became the SIG coordinator for the artificial intelligence SIG.
Wow.
Yeah, new direction.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I wanted to try something new and get involved with people outside of Japan, so that I can share ideas between Japan and abroad more effectively, and bring that knowledge back here to share, gain more knowledge myself of things that are going on outside of my own, established circles. And I've been involved with Eurocall for, I don't know, since 2015 or something like that. I've been to the conference face-to-face maybe 4 times, and online a couple of times, and I felt like it was time to make that connection.
So you're the AI SIG coordinator for Eurocall.
Yeah.
Tell us briefly.
I just started.
Oh, no, you're not getting away with that. No, you're not getting away with that.
I thought we were out of time. No,
we're not. We're not. I run this show. I'll tell you when we're out of time. Tell us briefly your thoughts on where AI might touch first our classrooms. I mean, I'm not just talking about quantum computers and the fact that AI exists and it's already there, even with DeepL. Or supposedly I have an AI algorithm in my TV and in other places. But in our classroom, where will we start feeling, you think, AI first? Apart from machine translation, which we already do have.
Well, I mean, yeah, machine translation for sure. But it's something I need. It's in terms of it practically entering into the classrooms, it's something that is coming in slowly, I think.
Chatbots, maybe?
Especially here in Japan.
Chatbots, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, I know somebody who's doing a project with robots, but I don't think that's going to be widespread, anytime soon. Yeah.
I downloaded. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go.
I downloaded a piece of software for my phone, which supposedly I saw an ad for it on Facebook, which tells you about the quality and the level of the ads I get on Facebook, which supposedly is a reflection of your personality and your behavior patterns. But it was an ad for a virtual girlfriend. It was an ad for virtual. Okay, I admit this is okay. This is like 2018. This is 2019, and it was an ad for a virtual girlfriend, and it purported to actually use an AI to give you a conversational experience with what should be sort of the idea of like a girlfriend in your phone. And I thought I'd try the free version just to see what it was like, and it was creepily accurate. You know, I would say things like tadaima, and it would say okaeri nasai, and then would start asking me what my day was like, and I'd say oh tsukareta, and then it would actually start to try to engage me in conversation. And it was almost weird. And of course I only had the free version, so I didn't go any further with it, but it showed a lot of potential, I thought, not just for the idea that, you know, you're going to have a girlfriend or something, but a chatbot aimed towards, say, people experiencing mental stress, or a chatbot aimed at people who want to do something that I'm looking into these days, that came from Aston's graduate school, Julian Edge, on cooperative development. The idea of getting you to start doing an introspection, a reflective practice with yourself, which I think you could do an AI chatbot with. And maybe an AI that was designed to actually help you with certain, I don't know, a grammatical aspect of language that you need to practice. I thought chatbots might be an interesting thing that might be coming along.
Well, what we're hoping in the year ahead, this is a 2-year position, is just to get people who have experience in this area to come and share their ideas in online events. And I'll share, that information with the OTJ community.
Please do.
Yeah, and to find out more about it. I mean, it's really an area that I want to explore more about. And as I said, I'm not an expert in this area yet, but I think this is something that that we can learn more about in the years ahead. Perhaps as something preparatory for the technology that's to come, or perhaps as users, getting in kind of at the early stage of its integration into education. Go whatever pace that's good for us. Not everybody wants to be an early adopter. Some people like to wait and get it settled and then start using later, and that's okay. Sitting back and watching and just having an awareness is fine too. So yeah, I think that in this role as a coordinator, I'll have opportunities to find out more and bring people together, people who want to know more about this area. So that's my mission.
And if you need any help from OTJtv, or I know a few people at OTJ, maybe I can help you with that.
I think you do know a few people.
Just tap me on the shoulder and I'll see. Maybe we can do some kind of collaboration someday between Eurocall and OTJ.
That would be really cool. That sounds great. I mean, I'm all up for collaboration.
And as am I. Okay, last chance, y'all. Oh, Brick, would you like to turn on your camera and your microphone, or just your microphone, whichever, sir?
Yeah. How's it going? Going back to the chatbot thing, I'm going to be, as you know, I'm working on a nursing book, and I'm going to be integrating a chatbot into there's an online component to the course, and so I'm going to be using a chatbot, and I'll be collecting data, seeing how they interact with it and how they respond to it, and basically the way it's going to function. I'm sure Jim would appreciate it, that it's a large class, and so me being able to elicit questions and answers from students in a large class is a logistic nightmare. And so having the chatbot take that role, the chatbot says, how do you ask a patient how they're feeling, and then they respond, and then it records, and then it compares to a text, some kind of inputted basic response, and then it gives them a score. And that's how it's going to work. And we'll see how it actually, how accurate it is. And how the students react to it. But all.
Thank you, Brick. If I might counter though, Adam mentions in the chat that his quick comment even before Brick mentioned his. Adam, I don't know if you're listening, but you mentioned that chatbots didn't really take off, right? So I don't know if you want to bring that to the fore, maybe give a little meat on those bones.
Yeah, okay. So I was remembering probably around about 2015 or earlier than that, 2012 or around about that time. And people were talking about text-based chatbots that, you can have a conversation and with these people. They had a few that actually were named, and they were sort of, you can plug it into your LMS and have your students actually have, practice having their conversations with these chatbots. And they were largely good, but they sometimes threw out, some strange sentences or something, but it always seemed a bit more of a novelty and never really turned into a mainstream teaching tool. So it sort of was one of those things where it looked like it was going in a good direction for a few minutes and then fizzled out. So
A text-based.
Well, but that was typing.
that was, those were mostly typing ones, and
which doesn't really work. It's barely a
Mm.
chat, right? Where the speaking has come up and has developed, and it basically kind of uses a Siri algorithm to it. And from what I'm going to see, like I'm going to be testing it, and it's a large group, and so I'm going to see how it works. But I'm excited to. Just when I saw that aspect of the online component was there, I thought, oh wow, this can be really good. This could be really good potentially.
Yeah, like even thinking of Siri, I know that some people have done research using Siri or Alexa with students. So there's that kind of stuff out there. People are starting.
Well, in my dissertation defense, I used Siri because I was talking about teaching students how to greet and showing that Siri was perfectly able to understand, hey, how's it going? What's up? And Siri could say, oh, I'm fine, Brick, where a student was blown away by a greeting like that.
Right, because it wasn't, hello, how are you?
Yeah, exactly. But Siri was able to deal with that kind of, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's up? And Siri could contextualize it and say, oh, I'm fine.
Well, if we think about how artificial intelligence is used in assessment, let's take two of the big kind of proficiency tests, IELTS and TOEFL. And if you go to the IELTS website, they say, you can rely on us because when you do the speaking component of our test, it's done with a real person. So it's reliable. Then you go to the TOEFL site. You can rely on us because real people are, can't be relied upon. We use AI. It's reliable. And so you've got the opposite arguments because TOEFL uses artificial intelligence to grade the writing and speaking sections of the tests. And then they say that there are some human checks, but it's very vague as to how much of a human check there is. Probably if the band doesn't match with the reading and the listening section, probably they check is my guess. But we've got, this is a really high stakes test.
Right.
And universities are making decisions, streaming students, sending students to different countries, all of, allowing them to be admitted with this test that's graded by AI. So, the flow down effect, I suppose, in the future will be that there will be AI used more in assessment in other classes, in classes. So I don't know if that will happen or not, but it's something that I predict.
Yeah, well, sorry for taking up your time, but one thing that you mentioned when you were talking, which I really like and I use, is for submission. It's either you submitted, you get a point; you don't submit, you get no points. You submit late, you get half a point. And for the AI the chatbot aspect of this course, it's going to be, did you? Because it records. It records and it saves the recording. So did you do it? And basically it's getting words out of their mouth. I mean, they have to respond to it and they have to say something in order, and then it records it. And then if there's a recording there, okay, you tried
Right.
and you know, did it elicit, and then
Right.
you know,
There-
it's better than nothing.
Right. Yeah. Because not every task that I assign is, you know, quality assessed. It's just the fact that you made an attempt is sometimes enough.
Yeah.
Some of the assessment tasks. So yeah,
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And then the other point you made, I mean, I didn't comment because you were kind of answering my questions as I was listening, was that if you want to know how they write, sit them down, give them a topic, and then have them write. And then, you know, they can't use, you know, if they've been depending on
Machine
you know,
translation.
thank you, machine translation,
Mhm.
then, you know, they're going to have a really hard time sitting down and having to write on their own.
Right.
And you
Right.
definitely can see that. And
Right.
One of the
that's-
first things.
so-
It's one of the first things I do in my first classes with some classes is just like, okay, I'm going to take 30 minutes. You're going to give me a self-introduction, no dictionaries, just want to see what you're really made out of. And they take it as face value, but then I tell them later on, now I know what your real skill is, and we're going to see where you're going to go from here. But thank you very much for showing me honestly where your baseline is. Now I know where your baseline is. Please remember, I know where your baseline is. So if you suddenly throw a beautiful DeepL translation at me, I'm going to think about that.
Yeah. But, you know, at the end of the day, when I say that we can sit them down and get them to do those written assignments in class and find out what their grammar levels like, find out about how well they can spell. But I mean, that doesn't really replicate the real world, does it? I'm never going to have to submit an abstract for an article that I wrote in Japanese without having access to the kind of tools that I would, you know, effectively be taking away from students in that context. So again, it really depends on what the course objectives are. If I'd been teaching certain grammar points, something I did do in my essay assessment was if there was a particular thing I was teaching them, like how to set up a rebuttal, like the pattern of the typical vocabulary and sentence structure you would use for a rebuttal, like using things like although something. Yeah. So I could make that part of my assessment. And that's something that they're going to come up with and show that they're skillful in doing, because it's a critical part of that form of writing. And I want to know that they can do that. I would expect that at the end of us having done lots of practice tasks and then them writing the essay and doing several drafts, because they did a 3-draft, you know, process in my class, I would hope that they take that skill with them, and that later, if they're writing an essay for somebody else, like, okay, yeah, rebuttals, I know how to do that. But yeah, I don't really find a lot of value in saying to my students, you know, for high stakes assessment items, you have to be able to write this perfectly with no tools at all. I wouldn't put a high value to something in my course that requires them to do something that they'd never be expected to do in the real world. And yeah.
Good point. Or that we ourselves wouldn't be willing to do.
Yeah.
If somebody asked me, well, Jose, can you give me a Japanese translation of the paper that you just wrote? I'd be going to DeepL, I'd be calling my friends, I'd ask my other friends to proofread my other friends' stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, my hope is that I can help my students survive and thrive in a real world environment and understand what kind of skills and tools they need to do that. Having English language skills is part of it, but knowing what tools and resources you can use to improve what you're producing is also part of it, and to do that effectively.
Right, exactly. Listen, I want to thank you very much for your generous gift of your time this morning. And conversation went as I thought it would, which is, Louise, from Louise. I was watching on FB, but came online to confirm something with Louise. Louise, would you like to open up your camera and your microphone, just because I could read this, but I think it'd be much more lovely to have you on camera to say it, unless you don't want to, and then you can just, here she comes.
Maybe not camera.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I I just caught something Louise said about the difference between assessment in TOEFL and IELTS. That AI is grading the writing and speaking sections of TOEFL, which I did not know. And I just wanted to check, is that what I heard? Because I wasn't sure. And do you know how long it's been the case?
For a number of years, for TOEFL, yes. I noticed it at some point when I was teaching a TOEFL preparation course at Meiji several years ago. So it's been at least that long. I don't know when it was actually integrated. I'm trying to pull up the TOEFL IBT site at the moment. AI assessment, but yeah, and here we are. The TOEFL test gives you the data you need. Hang on, it's only showing me part of it.
Want to drop that into the share, Louise, if you have a
Yeah,
second?
just 1 sec. I want to make sure I've got
No
the right
problem. Yep,
place.
no problem.
No, it's not there. It's not opening up to the whole screen. But anyway, it says centralized anonymous scoring conducted by both artificial intelligence and multiple humans. And they're kind of vague about it, about what the AI does and what the humans do.
Right.
I really can't find it here right now.
Oh, but it's fascinating to me because I've got a teenager who just took the TOEFL, and yeah, I was surprised with those two particular areas. I know that the listening and the reading are multiple choice, so there's no
Right.
issue with the grading of those. But I was really surprised with his speaking and writing assessments. One surprisingly good and one surprisingly bad, which, yeah, and he was surprised too.
Here we are. I found the link.
Okay, go for it.
I'm going to put the link into the, there we are.
There you go.
And read it out. The TOEFL IBT test gives you the data you need to make informed, confident decisions about the English skills of your applicants. Centralized anonymous scoring conducted by both artificial intelligence and multiple human raters ensures scores are fair, objective, and without bias. Now, this is about, this part here is really vague, right? There was another part somewhere that I found several years ago when I first told students that AI is involved in grading, that specifically mentioned that it was used for the writing and the speaking sections. So if I dig around, I can probably find that somewhere, or you could too. Yeah.
Sure. Mary.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, just one comment on this. Many years ago, when AI TOEFL was first coming out, here in Jalt, Hokkaido, we had a speaker who was one of the people writing that initial TOEFL test. And he gave a lot of insight. And we asked, why are they going from paper TOEFL to a computer-based? And he said, because in a lot of countries, if a woman was taking the TOEFL test, she failed. When it was a human man grading her, because it was not felt women should study abroad. And so they switched to one where it's now fair that whether you're a woman or a man, you're not going to be graded according to your sex.
Wow.
That's interesting to know.
Yeah, because they could see the ratio of, like, let's say from Germany, the number of women who were studying abroad versus men was equal, but from other countries, it was very, very low number of women. So that's all I wanted to put in. It was very interesting.
No, that's really
What year was that,
interesting.
Mary, that presenter came to Hokkaido? 2010s, 2000s?
It was literally, he was involved in the writing of the initial test. So when did computer-based TOEFL test start?
2010? I don't know. Wow.
Right.
But yeah, we come across these almost everyday incidences of to me, not having spent a lot of time within JALT, in the more active parts of JALT or other organizations like it, not knowing just how bad well, basically misogyny and sexism actually exists within academia. I still hear these stories, and they're still shocking to me that that's actually one of the reasons that you have to use AI to filter that out, is both good and disheartening at the same time.
It's really interesting. Like what I just put in the chat about these are just copied directly now from the writing section and the speaking section. And you know, the way that it says it's to ensure fairness, that it's AI and certified human raters. I'm going to share with you the IELTS page now, which, you know, posts it in a really different way. It says, unlike other English language tests that use AI machines to assess your speaking skills, your IELTS speaking test is completed in a quiet room with a qualified IELTS examiner. Find out why a face-to-face speaking test is unbiased and what you should expect on test day. So both of them are marketing it very differently, right? I'll share that link in the chat as well. But I think in the years ahead, we're going to have these issues that do come up over whether AI is fairer. I mean, the issue that Mary raised right now, there's no class favorite, there's no teacher's pet, there's no
sexism,
there's no sexism, racism, etc. If a computer's doing it, but there is
on the other hand,
potential for misunderstandings. And yeah, I mean, some students have said to me that doing their test for TOEFL and just speaking into the microphone and doing it in a noisy room with a lot of people around them, and just not being familiar with doing a speaking test in that way, when you're not looking at a person, you're just like hearing a beep and then you're spitting out your answer. They've sometimes said that they found it really kind of intimidating and unnatural. So I think in any test environment, there are going to be issues that really don't make it fair.
Totally agree.
Don't make it an easy way to understand the person's actual ability.
I remember when I was and this was already when I was a native English speaker. It wasn't an English test for me as someone coming from the Philippines to Canada, but it was required that you show that not only are you a native English speaker, that you're capable of academic level writing when you go to university. Our high school teacher would tell us there is never a fair situation, depending on who you're talking to. You just have to be flexible enough to know to adjust to whatever is in front of you, and to try to explain using communicative tactics that maybe you're having a bad day, or maybe you didn't say that sentence properly, but let me rephrase, those sorts of things. And also to your point about fairness, because we use AI, or you can take out all the racism and sexism. I think in an ideal situation you can, but I don't know if you remember that story. I think it was a Google voice or natural voice AI that was programmed by Google to present a conversational AI chatbot. And it ended up going crazy, and it ended up spewing all kinds of racist, horrible, sort of Nazi-like diatribes on removing, you know, ethnic dirt or something. And like this thing went crazy, and Google had to take it offline because people could actually trigger it to start saying these things.
Yeah.
And they did a forensic analysis into what made it to do stuff like that. And it turned out that part of the effort to try to get it to understand moral and philosophical understanding, there was an overt, not a bias, but a heavy weight towards certain philosophers that kind of made it think that way. So it depends on what you actually program the chatbot with, right?
Well, at the end, it's human made, right? So all the faults of humans go into it.
Well, we didn't have any faulty humans here today, and we had a lovely guest. Thank you very much, Dr. Louise Ohashi.
Oh, thank you. It was such a pleasure. Really.
Yeah, no, really, the pleasure was all ours. Certainly mine, if nothing else. I would like to invite anyone who is willing to open up their cameras and their microphones to join me in a round of applause for Dr. Louise Ohashi.
Thank you.
Mary, is that a hand up again, or I just forgot to lower your hand? Sorry. Okay, got it. Okay. Louise, thanks very much. I will be
Oh, an
saying,
absolute pleasure.
I will be saying, and yes, and again, one more time, it was our pleasure too. I will be saying thank you very much to everyone, and I will be closing the live stream now. So everyone, a big quick wave. Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
The duck.